Hello and welcome everyone to Last Level Press. I am Mr. Black, and this is the reveal of the new PC. Pardon the shaky cam there. As you can probably tell, this is not like my usual vlogs. This is shot with a very different camera, not a webcam. And I'm going to give you guys an idea of exactly what all is in the new PC. Some of you guys were curious about that. And following that, give you a more detailed tour of my workspace. Because I've seen some other YouTubers get asked that a lot. So I'm going to more or less head that question off at the front and give you guys a quick rundown of exactly the environs that I'm working in. Now, I thought about doing a more, can you call it traditional if it's a new phenomenon? But I thought about doing a traditional unboxing for this computer as a reveal, but seeing as it's not one item that I can just pull out of the computer because it's not a out of the box, because it's not a pre-built computer, it would just, I thought it would be weird to do an unboxing for all of these pieces. I just thought that would be kind of annoying and long and drawn out and not very interesting. So instead I decided to do a sort of post-assembly reveal like this. That way hopefully it's a little bit more concise as I can be. You guys know by now. If you're watching this, you know by now. I can be rather verbose and long-winded, but thank you for sticking with me anyway. And decided to do it this way instead. That way I can actually give you guys a full rundown without going for an hour going, I wonder what's in this box. Oh, look, screws. Oh, look, an assembly manual. But anyway, I'm doing it again. Let's get back to the task at hand. So, on to what probably most of you are most interested in. The pieces in the computer are the core, really. The GeForce GTX 780 video card. That thing is an absolute beast. It's got built-in cooling and is more or less one of the best video cards on the civilian market that's under $1,000. I think I paid about $600 for it. Cooling that thing are my Corsair H80i Hydro Series cooling. It's basically got a radiator built into it that sits right on top. That would be that little doohickey of the processor, so it gives it direct liquid cooling, and several fans that essentially blow through the radiator, which would be that centerpiece there in the illustration, so that you actually get cool air going through the tower of the PC. And let's see here. As for the hard drive, I'm running with a Samsung solid state. It's the 840 Pro series. It is a 512 gigabyte solid state. I basically bought the best solid state that I could possibly afford. And the processor, I had to go i7 because if I'm going to be keeping up with things that are on the current market and what I know is coming, anything less than i7 just will not cut it. So I'm using the 4770K Intel i7. If I remember correctly, I want to say that one is a quad core. Actually, I don't remember how many cores are in it. You can look that up for yourself. But again, one of the better cores that is under $1,000. As for the power supply, not quite as important, but I really liked this one because during the assembly process, it came with all of the cables and wires that I would need, a lot of extras, a lot of extensions, and I didn't have to essentially aftermarket my own power supply as I have in the past to be able to accommodate all of the bits and bobs that I wanted inside of the tower. So I'm using the TX70M Corsair power supply. It is quite reliable, quite heavy, as was the video card, as well as the case itself. And before I get to that, the last internal piece are the Viper Patriot. I forget exactly which Patriot kit this is, but it's 32 gigs worth of 1600 megahertz RAM, which means that it can keep up with quite a bit. I got really frustrated with my past PC of essentially running into a bottleneck for processing. Like, I had the RAM, I had a pretty good processor, but my GPU just couldn't keep up, and my hard drive couldn't really keep the information flow going the way that the other components could, so I got an overall slowdown, even though a lot of the components in my old PC should have been able to perform better than they did, but they just didn't. As for what they are all sitting in, this is actually a relatively cool case that I hadn't seen any of the previous runs of before. It's the Cooler Master Scout 2 Advanced. It is a little bit smaller than I anticipated. I had to remove one of the back panels on the inside for where you would insert extra hard drives. Luckily there was room enough for the single 2 terabyte hard drive that I've put in it and the solid state, even with that panel removed. Pardon me. But it's got a lot of good vents on it, and tell you what, rather than the box, let me move the chair and I'll show you a bit of the tower itself. I'm like losing my breath, trying to move around and narrate and everything. So, top-mounted USB, it's got USB 3 support, plenty of vents along the top, plenty along the back, and you can't see it now. Let me see if I can scoot that over. Let's see if I can spot it in the viewfinder. There we are. There should be, I don't know if this will show up in the recording, but there should be a window into, there we go, I think I can see that in the viewfinder, into the tower proper, and the radiator actually glows a little bit. So, as do the front. I kind of like the red LEDs behind the fans. So you get a lot of airflow going over everything. I got really, really paranoid when I was building this thing because it's the most expensive piece of hardware that I've ever worked with, built, or done anything with, professionally or personally. So I got really, really paranoid about overheating. I really did not want this thing to just, you know, melt down and break from the inside out. So I kind of went a little nuts with extra fans and making sure that everything had internal cooling and heat sinks, like the Viper series of the RAM. That does have its own heat sinks built into the RAM sticks. So when I checked after running a pretty graphic-intensive game, Far Cry 3, last night, after running that for about an hour, I checked the diagnostics, and the interior of this thing is running between 85 and 89 degrees, which is pretty damn good, because anything less than about 110 to 120 degrees is pretty much acceptable. So, the only other thing that you may have noticed I didn't mention are these. Extra fans, it's the SP120 Corsair series that I wasn't sure whether or not I would need. Again, I went overboard with cooling, and luckily it looks like I'm not going to need those. But if I do end up OCing this thing even more than it already is, because I did buy the OC edition of this video card, I may install those later just to make sure that everything stays cool and kosher and functional on the interior of the tower. The only other thing over here is that I actually just picked this up today. My SIG, S-I-I-G, I don't know, aluminum keyboard that I am going to be replacing this one with, because that is rather deceptive placement, considering I've been using a loaner keyboard until this evening, because for whatever reason, this thing just refuses to acknowledge that that keyboard exists. It keeps telling me that it doesn't detect any keyboards, so I'm going to replace that with that, and hopefully finally have a functional set. I've also been using, and will continue to use, my Logitech gaming mouse. Unfortunately, I cannot give you guys an exact model of what that is, because it was a gift, and I, for years now, no longer have the box. So unfortunately, I can't give you that exact model, but if you recognize it, screenshot that, pause the video, whatever, if you want to have a similar setup to what I do. Now, let me catch my breath. Because, wow, that's a lot all at one time. And you may have noticed I've basically got, like, stage lighting in here. That's because, yeah, that's what my fan looks like right now. And it doesn't work. So I can't have a ceiling light, and I don't really have room in here for like a standing lamp. So I've basically been using my environmental lighting that I use for when I actually film in here to illuminate this for this video. Ordinarily this room stays dark because, for one, I like to have dark backgrounds for whenever I record face cam and everything, because I like the way that it makes, you know, my face or Violeta's face, whoever's recording in here, pop. That way we're basically pasty white pale, so we stand out pretty well against a dark background, and I think that makes for a pretty good quality face cam, even though I'm not using the best camera to do it with. As for the actual setup that we're using, by the way, this is the part where some of you may get bored, so feel free to close this out now if you're really only interested in the PC. And I guess before I get into our setup, to wrap the PC, because I know some of you guys will be curious, I paid in total right about $2,000 for it. It came to about $2,080, but because I am not using these, I can more or less write off a little bit of that, and I also got some mail-in rebates that I've got to send in that'll knock it down to right about $2,000. Now, that said, mind you, I could have easily paid $3,000 for this exact same setup. Why? Because I used a really, really cool website, which I will link to in the description below. The name escapes me right now, but if you're curious and you want to build something like this, but you're intimidated by part compatibility, like I was. I apologize for the shaky cam. Let let me double fist this camera. If you're intimidated by part compatibility like I was, because I've built computers before, but it was almost a decade ago, and it was never completely from scratch. Like, I didn't have to wire, like, the things that you put from the USB port or to the power button onto the motherboard. I hadn't had to go quite that involved before. So if you want to build one completely from scratch like this, I do recommend that you get somebody who's done it before to help you out with the actual assembly process. But in terms of actually picking which parts even fit together, check out the website that I linked below, because it essentially draws its entire inventory list and helps you assemble your computer piece by piece, step by step, and draws from a number of different vendors. And it will automatically display those parts for sale at the lowest price available from any of them. And this includes places like Amazon, like NCIX, and several other different places. Most of the stuff that I bought, I got from Amazon and NCIX. And I highly recommend NCIX in particular because their customer service is superb. So if you're intimidated by that, the good part is it doesn't just draw all of those parts from those vendors. It also has up in the top left corner of that website a compatibility filter button, which is on by default, meaning that when you pick your first couple of pieces, you should start with a motherboard or a processor, either one. Once you pick those, it will then cascade down, and it will only show you pieces that are compatible with those base pieces from then on, and everything else as well. The one thing that I did kind of get annoyed by in the assembly of this one is that I ended up having to get Windows 7 Pro rather than just base Windows 7 64-bit, because Microsoft have been kind of greedy about this, and even though a 64-bit operating system should be able to run up to 32 gigs worth of memory like I've got, for whatever reason, only the Pro edition of Windows 7 actually allows you to make full use of all of that. Otherwise, it will only let you really tap 16 gigs worth, even though a 64-bit operating system has no excuse for that kind of limitation. It is an artificial limitation, and I will call them on it as such. Now then, that said, like I said, if you want to build, I encourage you to do so. It is grown-up Legos, it is a lot of fun, it can be a little frustrating, but this website takes a lot of the learning curve and a lot of the apprehension and anxiety about, oh, I don't know if these will actually go together, I don't want to waste $400 on parts that I can't use together. This eliminates that, and it really allows you to just look at, okay, do these parts do what I want? And I don't have to worry about seeing things that would be a waste of my money in terms of not being able to use them. It's just a matter of, do these do what I want? So that's more or less all of my thoughts regarding that. I encourage all of you guys, if you've never built a computer before and you want to start, this is the perfect time, because it's a great website to do so. A lot of parts seem to be getting like bundled and good deals and stuff now. And as I mentioned, because that draws from a lot of different vendors, it also draws from their sales. So, like I said, I could have probably spent another third more on this rig that I didn't, because it automatically showed me where good sales and bundle deals were. So, that's the end of that rant, and no, I was not contracted by that website. If you really think I was contracted by them to plug them, do you think I would have forgot their name? Okay, now, on to the rest of our setup. You may have noticed this is a rather cramped little room. That's because this is a converted office, or rather a converted bedroom into office sort of space. This is where the magic happens most of the time. I love my big, giant Acer flat screen. My baby. It doesn't have the greatest refresh rate ever, but it serves its purpose. Now, I've got a new, you may have noticed the blanket down there covering my old surround system, as I may have mentioned in one of the videos I recorded recently. Because of taking the whole desk apart, doing all of this, decided to finally swap out for the old spare set of surround speakers that I've had sitting around for like a year, but just didn't want to discombobulate my desk to install, because my other ones were working okay. They were those testy kind of speakers that if you nudge the wire just so, the whole thing will just freak out and start giving you static and feedback. But since it was all discombobulated for hooking up the new PC anyway, decided to plug those in. And again, they're Logitech Surround. Because they were a gift, don't remember exactly what model they were, but you may have seen these before, so if you like them, you know what to look for. And yes, you will notice that there is gaming and anime and movie paraphernalia pretty much all around here. As for gaming collection, that's not it in its entirety, not by a long shot. A lot of it is now sitting on Steam, as well as in the room that is on the other side of this wall. But that's a great deal of my PC gaming library at any rate. As for this area, some of you may recognize this desk from the Midas Touch series, from my Dota review, from Last Days, among other things. And I use the big black sheet rigged up back there so that you may recognize this angle-ish, sort of. There we go. So that if I'm sitting there, not with a box in the way, usually the auto lighting adjustment on this camera will allow for basically my pasty white face to really stand out against the black sheet background, and it'll essentially turn all of that background stark black, which really gives a really nice, clean, professional looking result if I do it right. I haven't always done it right. Some of you are gonna be like, well, yeah, I could tell it was a sheet sometimes. Yeah, I know, I'm still perfecting the technique, but it's the thought that counts. As for what I usually set it up on, it's just an old tripod. Let's not get lens flare going on. This is not a Michael Bay movie. And I'll usually set that right about here. Also, just honesty note, this is about the cleanest this room has looked in the last 6 months. I was just really kind of self-conscious about showing off my entire workspace to you guys before having cleaned it. So Violeta and I, she was a big help, went through and kind of ripped this place apart, getting it all clean and neat, and I'm going to try to keep it this way from now on, because the whole, you know, messy workspace, messy mind, and I want to try and get more focused these days, especially because now that I have this beast built, I'm so excited to do new things. I really want to put this thing through its paces and just create, and show you guys all the amazing and awesome stuff that I was playing around with last night to just see what it can do, and it's amazing! So right after I finish recording this, I'm going to go straight into recording some more episodes. I hate to have had this long lull this whole week long in the lack of content, so I'm going to really try and build up another big buffer worth of stuff, and probably go up to 2 or 3 videos a day for a while, just because I know I'm going to want to be playing so much stuff, and show you guys what this thing can do, and just showing off games at settings and doing things that I never could have done before. So, anyway, ordinarily, also, this space right here is a little more cramped than it looks right now. That's because this is my usual chair, and when I'm joined by Violeta, this chair will be right about here, and another identical chair to this will be sitting pretty much where this one is. So you can imagine, that's a pretty sizable chair. It's nice and comfy, but it's pretty big, with another one right there. So we're usually pretty scrunched up in there. It's a bit cramped, but we make it work. And in fact, there have been a few times where, you know, I've wanted to record something and have solo face cam because we're not going to both be doing commentary, but she's wanted to watch because she likes to observe cool games. So hopefully, or not hopefully, but thankfully, when I angle my webcam, which, yes, is totally ghetto rigged, sitting on top of a Loctite adhesive can, and also on top of a coffee mug. It's just literally duct tapes to the top of it here. If I angle it properly, you can see me, but not her sitting right next to me. So it actually makes for a nice arrangement when we don't want both of us in the shot at the same time. Plus, minor note, my awesome but not so awesome because it's gotten bubbly and weird Mass Effect mousepad, which came with, or no, it didn't come with, I got that separate right around the time I got Mass Effect 3, which unfortunately I got really overhyped for, but that's another matter entirely. As for lighting, again, I like to try and have pale faces like ours stand out against a dark background, so I've set up 2 desk lamps, one here and one here, which usually, since I usually have like white papers and stuff here, and this is a pretty pale wall, will reflect well against those surfaces and get onto our faces. That way we actually get pretty well illuminated. Not quite as well as I would like, but better than nothing, and I'm still trying to figure out if I can tweak these a little bit and get a little bit more direct light without casting weird shadows and sending the white in the screen just off the charts so that we look like we're glowing. I don't want that effect. So little kinks that we're still working out. I've still got a lot of work to do in that regard, but you know, it's a constant learning process. As I've said before, my only professional training in video production is having literally done a video production class in high school. Other than that, it's been purely my own self-teaching, figuring out, okay, what do others do? Let's look up as many tutorials on YouTube as I possibly can, how to do 3-point lighting, how to actually do backlights, it's a constant learning process, and I try to continue to strive, as always, to give you guys as high quality material as I possibly can. But as an amateur, I know I'm sitting at the bottom rung of the ladder, but I'm constantly trying to climb for you guys. On a more personal note, just the last little touches in here, you may notice up there, Violeta's plushie collection, as well as the keen-eyed amongst you may pick out a few spoilers. I won't point them out, but some indications of things to come in future projects. I'll just let the keen-eyed amongst you pick them out and figure them out for yourself. Just observe. So yes, we do have very big plans. We just got a lot of work to do before we can bring some of them to fruition, even with the new rig. But we've also got a fish tank in here. Unfortunately, these guys live a rather epileptic life because obviously, since the webcam is over there, I would be sitting there, and the webcam is angled directly this way. I've got to turn off their lights pretty much every time I record, so I'm glad I haven't really killed any of them with that, because I know some fish really don't like to be in the dark at all, but luckily, all my little tetras seem to be doing okay and not dying anymore. I bought one at PetSmart a while back that was essentially a plague fish, and suddenly every other fish in the tank damn near died. These are the survivors of the Tetra Holocaust apocalypse. But yeah, just buy your fish from actual fish stores, people. Don't buy fish from PetSmart because, good God. Anyway, over here are a lot of my prop working tools. You guys haven't seen as much as very early on I intended for you to see in terms of prop production. The only prop that I think I've actually had on screen as yet was the Juggernaut mask for the Dota 2 review, which no one ever pointed out. I put a lot of work into that thing, and nobody has appreciated it. I feel so unloved. But I am working on several other much more ambitious prop projects for when we do sort of spoof videos and more involved video reviews for games. We've built an entire set, as some of you who follow me on DeviantArt may know, of Fallout New Vegas Ranger veteran armor, as well as a full set for Violeta of Talon Company combat armor, which looks pretty damn good on her, I must say. And there's also another project, which, again, I will not spoil, but you saw a little hint of if you were observant over there, that is my most ambitious project to date, and there's a little piece of it sitting over there on that shelf. But that, I think, pretty much covers most of what I wanted to do with this vlog. Again, I just wanted to familiarize you guys with not only my hardware, but my workspace, so that you know exactly the conditions I'm working in, what is feasible for me to produce and what is not, and also where I want to go from here. So within our setup, I'm always very open-eared for suggestions, because I want, like I said, to be able to do as much as I possibly can for you guys, but within such a limited setup, there's only so much I can do. So if you guys have any more ideas on how I might be able to extract even more practical use out of this space, by all means, let me know. Especially if it looks like I've tried to do something in something that I produced and it looks like I didn't pull it off quite well enough. Let me know that. That way, when I try to do something similar in future videos, I can do it properly, or at least do it better, because I'm always wanting to improve for you. So, I think, unless I cut something in later on, which I very well may do. And one more quick note with the actual desk setup. I know some of you are going to immediately go, "What are you doing, Mr. Black? You're an idiot. You're setting a bottom-vented PC on a carpeted floor. You're inviting so much dust and dust bunnies and lint and everything else into your tower. You're going to destroy that amazing piece of hardware." No, I'm not. Calm your tits. This is okay. I know it's not ideal for it to be in even a carpeted room, much less sitting on a carpeted surface. But from the angle before, I realized after I had shot that I didn't really show very well that is actually sitting on a very highly dusted off and smoothed off, so that there's no sawdust or dust or anything on it, wooden board, so that it's not actually venting or fanning or pulling air or dust or anything straight out of the carpet and into the tower proper. I knew better than that. I would like to eventually get like a plastic placemat to actually set around the desk setup proper. That way, for one, I'm not trying to roll around in rolly chairs on carpet, because that is rather difficult, but to also just keep less dust from even being in this area. But for now, that's the best I can do, so that's exactly what I'm working with. And I apologize for the terribly unprofessional rat's nest of wires back here, but I haven't yet set like a board or anything up back there to just keep all of that out of view. And also, I neglected to mention that that is where the sub sits on my surround system. I think that'll about call it for this vlog, so thank you all very, very much if you have followed me this far into the video, because that means you actually care, and weren't just here for the technology porn of the beginning of the video. So thank you all very much for joining me here at Last Level Press. I'm Mr. Black, and I wish you all, as always, good gaming and Godspeed.